Alright guys, so in this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how we can start end-to-end testing our application. But before we get started on writing any code or writing any end-to-end tests, we need to distinguish the difference between a unit test and an end-to-end test. So in the last 3 episodes of our NestJS testing tutorial, what we did was we wrote unit tests. And unit tests are basically tests that test a single component of your application. In your entire application, you'll have many different components, many different features, many different functionalities, and what you want to do is you want to test each individual component. The reason why you do that is you want to make sure that the code that you're writing is actually doing what it's supposed to do in respect to its own domain. Okay? And so you definitely do want to write unit tests because it definitely helps you keep track of certain changes that happens with certain functions. So maybe, for example, you changed an implementation of a function and your test might fail. So that tells you that something changed and you need to refactor your test or refactor the code. Okay, so unit tests are a good way to ensure that our isolated components are working as expected. And it makes sense because if you look at the test that we wrote, for example, we wrote a unit test for this create user method, and all we're really ensuring is that it's taking in the correct parameters, it's encoding the password, and it's calling these methods correctly with the correct parameters. As long as we know that that's working correctly, then we're all good. If for some reason when we wrote this test, and let's say, for example, the encode password didn't actually encode the password, and it's calling .create and it's calling .save with the raw password, that tells us something. Okay, we don't need an end-to-end test to figure that out for us. We can do that using a simple unit test. So that's why unit tests are very important. Now, unit tests do not communicate with other components of your application. So notice how when we wrote unit tests, we did something called mocking. You'll notice that inside the user service spec.ts file, we actually mocked out all of our repositories methods. So we mocked out the create, the save, and the find one method. And that's because when we unit test, we do not care about anything else that the other methods might do. Now, the reason why we mock is very important to understand because ideally, let's say, for example, if let's say your application, right, that method call is going to call some API or call some database, a unit test should be fast. They should be only focusing on what the function is supposed to do. When you have a bunch of unit tests that calls a bunch of databases or APIs, it's going to slow down your unit tests, and you don't want that. So what you do is you mock out the unit test, okay? And when you actually need to call the database or when you actually need to call the API, you let end-to-end tests take care of that. Okay, when it comes to integration tests or end-to-end tests, that is where you're actually taking all of your components and combining them all together. So in an actual end-to-end test, we don't actually want to mock out the encode password method. We don't want to mock out the user repository method. We don't want to mock out user repository at all, like the user repository.save. We want to actually let the test, we want to actually let all of these methods call the API or call the database, and we want to let it actually create a user in the database. Okay, so that's what end-to-end testing takes care of for us. So instead of doing everything inside of the unit test, we let end-to-end testing take care of that for us. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Okay, and other examples of when you would write tests inside end-to-end tests is, for example, if you want to test status codes being returned. So let's say if you visit a route and it returns a 403, you typically want to test that in an end-to-end test. Also, if you want to ensure that a user has logged in successfully, you also want to test that in an end-to-end test as well. Okay, so we'll go ahead and write out some end-to-end tests. So let's go and do that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go inside this test folder that you see right over here. So this was created by the NestJS project. So if you guys had not deleted it, you could just reuse this. But it's important that you also have this just e2 JSON file. So if you guys don't have these 2 files, maybe you might have deleted it because you felt like you didn't need it. Just go ahead and make sure you copy and paste this. But I'll have the code in a GitHub repository so you guys can reference this. So don't worry. So what we're going to do is we're going to write some end-to-end tests for our controllers. So let's go ahead and test out. Let's test out the user's controller. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and test out the create method or the create endpoint. So let me go ahead and just close everything out. Oops. So we have the user's controller. And we're going to go inside this E2E spec file. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead. Oh, why did I close that? Okay. I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call this users.e2e spec.ts. So it's going to be users.e2e-spec.ts. Okay, and based off of the just E2E configuration, it'll basically look inside this folder for every single file that ends with .e2e-spec. You can obviously change this if you want to, but we'll just leave it alone for now. Okay, and what I want to do is I just want to kind of like, I kind of just want to restart everything. So instead of just, doing everything inside here, I want to create my own. And we can actually also delete this test over here because we actually changed our application. So this is actually going to give us an invalid response. You know what? Let me actually do this. Let me actually run the command real quick. There's actually a command called, or not command, the script. There's a script called test:/e2e, and that'll actually run the E2E test. So let's run that. So yarn test E2E. And let's just make sure that this fails. So this fails, but that's fine. Let's just make sure. Okay, there we go. So you can see that it says expected 200, got 4 not found. So what happens is that this testing module, it'll actually run the application for us. It'll start the server, and it'll actually try to visit the route. And if it fails, it'll give us that. It'll give us the response. And you can see that we also use assertions too. And you can see that it expected 200, but it gave us a 404. Okay, let me just delete that because we don't really need that anymore. So what we'll do is I'll just copy and paste all of these over here. And we're also going to import the app module as well. And what I'll do is I'll just call this users controller E2E test. Okay. And we'll just pretty much mimic what we're doing here, and I'll explain to you guys what's happening. So on line 7 inside this app .e2e spec file, what they're doing is they're declaring a variable called app, and they're type annotating as iNest application, and that's basically the interface of what the Nest application looks like. So it actually will give you all of the IntelliSense. So for example, all the methods that you'll call are going to be are going to appear over here on the app itself. So any middlewares, etc., will be over there. Okay, now for before each, what happens here is I think we might actually need to change this to before all, because what happens here is before every single test, it's actually going to try to set up the application. Okay, so before every single test that it runs, it's going to do that. I think what we need to do is we actually need to change this to before all, because we only want to let that happen once instead of happening every single time. Otherwise, we're going to run into some issues. So we'll actually change this to before all instead. Okay. And what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and create a testing module. So we'll go ahead and do const module fixture. And what a fixture is in general, like a test fixture, what that is basically just a term for labeling an environment that is used for testing. So for example, when they say test fixture, that's basically the environment where tests are going to run. In our case, this fixture that we're calling it is really just going to be this module that we're going to create. So we'll label this, we'll type annotate this as testing module, and we're going to need to add the async keyword in a bit. So we'll call test.create testing module, and we're going to go ahead and just provide the imports, and all we need to do is just provide the app module. Okay, so let me just add the async keyword in front of the callback function, and we're going to need to call compile. And that's pretty much it. So once that's done, we can go ahead and reference the module fixture variable, and we can call create nest application, and that'll actually create the nest application for us, and then we can just call app.init. So you don't have to worry so much about what this does. All you need to know is that this just sets up the environment for us, so we can actually start visiting the endpoints and getting the actual getting the responses. Okay. So NestJS has the library supertest. I think it comes with it by default. So it uses supertest to actually make the requests, and we can use that to actually get the response and stuff as well. So it's important to note that. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just say it should, let me see, let's just say, I think, what should I call this? it should create a new user. Okay, so what I'll do is we're going to go ahead and basically have this test out our create method or create function, or what am I saying? So remember that this test is going to test this create controller method. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and return request. We're going to reference app, and we're going to call get HTTP server, and we're going to call .post instead of .get, because remember it's a post request. So we're going to need to call /API let's see, users /create, and then we're going to need to provide the request payload. And to do that, there should be I think what we can actually do is we can actually provide that right over. No, not there. Let me see real quick. We should be able to provide that. Let me double check. Oh yeah, so there's a method called send, and we can just pass it here. So remember, let's just go back to our controller. So remember, it needs to follow this create user DTO. Okay, so let's do that. So we need the username. So let's do Anson. Password, we'll do Anson. And then email, we'll do anson@gmail.com. So this will obviously be testing the case where it actually succeeds. Okay. And then once we're done with passing that in, we can go ahead and expect a 201, because that's what the controller should send back, because it's a post request. So let's go ahead and run the test again. So let's see what happens. So it should succeed. I'm not sure why it says hold on, let's see what's going on over here. Your test is continuing. Okay. You know what I'll do is let me go ahead and do this. So I'm not sure why it's saying 404 not found. API /users /create. Let me see. So it's saying that it failed to find that endpoint, but that should be the correct endpoint though. So /API /users /create. Not sure why. Let me try again. So now it seems like it's giving us a connection refused. That's a little bit strange. Let's try again. I'm not sure why this is happening. It seems like, let me just double check just to make sure. So we have everything is identical. So we have before all. Okay, that should be fine. We have our test. We have our testing module. We're importing that. We are compiling it. Okay, everything seems fine. I'm not sure why it's throwing an error. Let me just delete this app file. And let me just see what happens here if we try to run just this test. Okay. I'm not sure why it's still giving us a 404 not found. I think it might probably be because we need to set the global prefix. Yeah, I think I know why. Okay, I think I know why. If I remove /API, this should actually work. Yeah, it's because it doesn't actually register the middleware for us, so we actually have to do it ourselves. So let me just show you guys real quick. So this should actually work now. Okay, there we go. Yeah, and you can see that it actually console logged the hashed password, which means that we know that it's being created. And I'll actually go into the database and show you what's happening. So let me actually go ahead and do this. So let me change it back to /API. Let me go ahead and set the global prefix to API, and that should work. Okay. So let me see what's going on over here. So okay. So let's go ahead and run that test. So it should create a new user. But actually, what's going on over here? Wait, cannot find source file. Seems like it's trying to find the app.e2e file, but we don't have that file anymore. That's a little bit of, let's see, yarn e2e. Okay, I'm not sure why it's complaining about that. Because I don't think that really has any effect on... let me just see again. Okay, there we go. Now let me go into my database. And the database was called tutorial DB. So if I go and do select from user, you'll see that those users are now being created. Because like I said, it's an actual end-to-end test. We're not mocking anything. So I'm gonna try Anson. And let's try it again. So that test should automatically run again because we're in watch mode. Okay, there you go. So it's actually creating a user, and you can see that it's appearing over there. Now, what you should do for good practice, what you should do instead is you should actually run these end-to-end tests in a test environment, because right now it's actually trying to connect to our actual database that we use for development. And I would not recommend that because it can become problematic when it comes to trying to figure out, like, what is test data and what is development data. So it's better if you just actually create a separate database for this. The way that you could set this up is inside app module. We don't actually have environment variable set up just yet. But what I would do is I would actually set up an environment variable, and I would set the environment variable to be in test mode. So when it reaches test mode, it's going to read all of the environment variables from the test environment, and it's going to connect to the database with the test database. So we don't actually interfere with our development or production data. It's very important that you do that, so that way you don't interfere with any possible data itself. And what you can do after, when the test is done, is you can actually delete the database or drop all the tables so you have a fresh new database to work with for your tests. Okay, now let's go ahead and continue. So right now our tests are passing, which is good. Okay, now let's go ahead and write a couple more tests. Now let me see if I can actually do this. Let me actually move this inside a describe. Okay, so let me just make sure that this works real quick. Okay, good. So let me go ahead and write another test. So let's go ahead and test other scenarios too, because like I said, we're only testing the case where it's successful, but what happens if it fails, right? Because remember, our application could fail. So let's go ahead and do, it should return a 400 when invalid username. Okay, so we'll go ahead and return request app.get HTTP server. And we'll go ahead and post. Let me go ahead and just create a endpoint, or create a variable. So we'll call this so that way I don't have to keep on redefining it or passing the same value over and over again. So let's send a username with an invalid username. Remember, the username has to be at least 3 characters, because that's what we have it set to. So just do an password. We'll leave that as Anson, and an email. Okay, so for now what we'll do is we'll spec 201, but you'll see that the test is going to fail because it should give us a 400. And there we go. You can see that it says should return a 400. It says expected 201 got 400, which is exactly what it should be doing. So that's good. We know that it's failing on purpose, but if we change it back to a 400, it should pass. And that's correct because remember, like I said, if the username is invalid, it should give us a 400. Okay, and if you want to go a further step, you can also check the response body to see if the actual username error message is there, but we're not going to do that. Let's go ahead and provide an invalid password. Let me go and do this. Provided. Okay. So let's pass an invalid password, but a valid username. So let's just do Anson Anson NestJS. Okay, and we'll do password that. So let me actually rerun this again because we're in watch mode. I'm going to exit watch mode. Okay, so why did that? Okay, so yeah, it gave us a 400. Good. Let's try to see if it gives us back a 201, and it should fail. Perfect. And it's saying created, got 400 by request. Now, one thing that I should mention is that the reason why you might want to drop your database after every single request, not drop the database, but drop tables, is because, like I said, if your database takes care of things such as unique constraints, because right now, our username and email, we don't have any constraints on them, so we can create the same records over and over again. Okay, so it's important that you should drop your database after, and then synchronize it on startup, so that way you don't have any duplicate data. Okay, but for now we'll leave this alone, and you can see that yes, when we provide an invalid password, it gives us a 400, and setting it to 201 will fail. Let's do the same thing for email. So it should return a 400 when invalid email is provided. So let's just do Anson for the email, and it should just give us a 400. Okay, now if I try to do something like 401, that should obviously not work because it should be 400. Okay, good. Now, let's say if I change the email to anson@gmail.com, but we expect a 400, this should fail. Let's try it again. Because sometimes we're in watch mode, it takes a bit to pick up. Let's see, why is that giving us a 400? Oh, wait, I'm sorry, because the password is invalid. So it should return a 400 when email is provided, or when invalid email is provided. Okay, so we have a valid username, we have a valid password now. Before we didn't have a valid password, so that's why it was giving us 400. Okay, so you can see now we have a valid username, password, and we have a valid email. We're expecting it for 100, but that's incorrect. It gave us a 201, and that's good. It should give us a 201. Okay. But that just tells us that it works perfectly fine. So let's go ahead and just pass in only an invalid email, and that'll give us a 400. And there you go. So it works just fine. So yeah, that is pretty much it. We've tested all those cases. I'm trying to think if there's any other cases that we need to worry about. Seems like we don't necessarily need to, because the validation is already taken care of for us. But obviously, if you had other complicated logic, you would have to handle it yourself. But that's just a simple example of how you can end-to-end test creating a user. Okay, and realistically, you can. I encourage you guys to end-to-end test your other endpoints too. Like, take this as a start to testing other endpoints as well. Okay. So that's going to be pretty much it for this video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace out.